Thank you very much, Bhaskar. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming one of the most brilliant minds of this century, Professor Amartya Sen. William and Namita have been trying to persuade him to attend the festival for the past few years, and it's an absolute privilege to welcome him here this morning.
All right now. Well, Your Excellency, Governor of Rajasthan, and other friends, I'm of course very deeply honored to be here this morning at the Jaipur Literary Festival. My talk is called "A Wish a Day for a Week." On being invited to the Jaipur Festival, I was naturally nervous about attempting an opening address to such an elite gathering. However, about 10 days ago, I saw in the newspapers, indeed in all of them, that India has entered triumphantly into, quote unquote, the elite club of the world. The Times of India's headline said, I quote, GCLV DV launch successful. India joins elite club, unquote. As an Indian citizen, I immediately lost all fear about not being able to get into the elite club. However, I had a problem in not knowing what GSLV DV is or does. On probing, I found that GCLV-DV is famous because it carries a GSAT-14 communication satellite. That seemed just what I needed. And so I decided to use the GSAT-14 communication satellite to communicate well beyond my station in life. High above the clouds, I came across a figure who looked very impressive, who explained that she was the goddess of medium things. Gosh, I said, medium you may be, but you look very impressive. You should see, she replied, the goddess of large things. I said you could please introduce me to her, but are you sure that you are really a goddess? Yes, I am, she responded firmly. I am, as I told you, goddess of medium things. But you're right, I'm very informal, and you can call me GMT. That is my pet name. Isn't GMT some kind of time? I asked her. Yes, she said, I can give you the correct time also, one of my specialties, but more importantly, I can grant you a wish. In fact, more than one wish for your country. How jolly, I said. May I have 7 wishes, a wish a day for my country for a week? Please, please, let us get on with it. Sure, GMT said, but why are you in such a hurry? I explained, I'm going to the Jaipur Literature Festival. You have heard of the famous Jaipur Festival, my goddess? I asked. Yes, GMT said, but it's really so big now that it has been moved from my care to the care of the goddess of large things. Still, I will try to help you. Make a medium-sized wish about literature. So I jumped in and said, classical education in language, literature, music, and the arts is being seriously neglected in India. Very few people study Sanskrit anymore, nor do they study ancient Persian or Latin or Greek or Arabic or Hebrew or Old Tamil. We need serious cultivation of classical studies for a balanced education. In India's increasingly business-oriented society, there is generally far less room today for the humanities. And that is surely a problem, is it not, goddess? But, said the goddess, Rabindranath Tagore in your village, Shantiniketan, used to grumble that science education was being neglected. So how can you say the opposite? That was then, madam, I said, and this is now. Rabindranath was right in his days, but bright students now, everywhere in India, go for science and technology and look down on humanities. So I asked the goddess, asked the goddess, asked me, you wish to have a greater role of humanities in Indian education? Something like that, I replied. What a vague statement, the goddess said, something like that. You must have clearer ideas. Clearer, do you mean more precise, dear goddess? I asked. No, said GMT, you are making the common mistake of assuming that a clear statement needs to invoke precise magnitudes. A good statement of an inherently imprecise concern, and most important concerns in the world are imprecise, must capture that imprecision and not replace it by a precise statement about something else. You should learn to speak in an articulate way about ideas that are inescapably imprecise, as a man called Aristotle put it more than 2 millennia ago. And that is one of the reasons why the humanities are important. A novel can point to a truth without pretending to capture it exactly in some imagined numbers and formulae. Okay, then now go on to your second wish, asked the goddess. Well, I said, may I go into politics? GMT looked unsurprised and said, I think I can guess what you're going to ask, knowing your left-wing views. You are on the left in India, aren't you? I replied, nothing escaped you, goddess, I am. But my political wish is to have a strong and flourishing right-wing party that is secular and not communal. Why? Asked the slightly puzzled goddess. There's an important role, I tried to explain, for a clear-headed, pro-market, pro-business party that does not depend on religious politics and does not prioritize one religious community over all others. GMT said, surely there was such a party in India, wasn't there, led by some very smart people. I said, yes, madam, there was. It was called the Swatantra Party, and among its leaders was Minu Masani, an extremely smart fellow indeed, but the party died. I wish it would be revived. Let me recollect, GMT said. This Minu Masani, was he really in favor of non-communal politics, and did he believe in the brotherhood of all people, what the French revolutionaries called fraternity? I seem to recollect, the goddess went on, that Masani said some unflattering things about fraternity in one of his public speeches. Yes, goddess, I told GMT. He was staunchly secular and very much in favor of fraternity, but in a light-hearted remark in 1946, Masani said that he adored fraternity, but given the misuse of the word after the French Revolution, he did not use it. He went on to say in the Constituent Assembly of India on December 17, 1946, when I introduce my brother, I call him my cousin. Would that be your favorite party then? Asked the goddess. No, absolutely not, I said. But I'd very much like the party to be there, giving Indian voters the choice of supporting a secular pro-business point of view. It would be very good for Indian politics. The support that the right-wing pro-business point of view receives should not have to be parasitic on making an alliance with religious politics. Okay, said JMT, can you make your explanation short? We don't have much time. Let me remind you that you're speaking to me and not lecturing at the Jaipur Festival. What is your third wish? I would like the parties on the left to be stronger, I said, but also more clear-headed and much more concentrated on removing severe deprivation of the really poor and downtrodden people in India. But what about the priority, JMT inquired, they attach to their dedication to fighting against American imperialism? Now that the Soviet Union is gone, the Chinese are beating the Americans in the market economy, the Latin Americans and the Vietnamese are racing ahead with their own economic and social progress. Surely the Indian left is the only remaining political group in the world on whom the mantle of fighting American imperialism has fallen. And in giving priority to their dedicated pursuit of that philosophical priority, they have made various parliamentary moves that have steadily reduced the number of seats they themselves have in the parliament. It's not easy for me to make them politically stronger until they themselves think afresh, said the goddess. I hope they will, I said. What the left really has to concentrate on is reversing the terrible state of the really poor people in India, rather than nursing an antiquated understanding of imperialism or joining the other political parties in agitating for cheaper amenities for parts of the middle classes. Another lecture, said GMT. But I'm a patient goddess and ready to listen to your gumble about your own friends, so go on. What's your fourth wish? I replied, I would like the media to be more responsive to the needs of the poorest people and less single-minded in the coverage of the world of glitzy entertainment and shining business opportunities. They're right to grumble about the way subsidies waste economic resources, but largely fail to denounce the subsidies for the better off, in the way subsidies for the unemployed and the hungry are savaged in the press. Reading the papers or listening to media on the fiscal irresponsibility of supporting employment schemes and food subsidies, you would scarcely guess that many times as much government money is spent on subsidizing electricity for those who are lucky enough to have power connection, a third of the Indian people have no connections at all, subsidizing diesel, cheapening fertilizers, offering low-cost cooking gas. Most Indians have no instrument into which these inputs would go, than on supporting food and employment schemes for the poor. The latest figures are the following. Subsidies on food, 0.85% of GDP. Employment guarantee scheme, NREGA, costs 0.29% of GDP. Compared with that, the power subsidies in various forms for those who have electric connections amount altogether to more than 1 full percentage point of the GDP, possibly much closer to 2% of GDP, to which should be added 0.66% on fertilizer subsidy and 0.9% on petroleum, cooking gas, etc. So the much criticized food subsidy and employment guarantee for the poor and unemployed, which is supposed to be so fiscally irresponsible, costs about 1.14% of GDP altogether, whereas the cost of subsidizing electricity, fuel, fertilizers for the relatively better off is minimally 2.63% and possibly closer to 3.63% of GDP, more than 3 times what is allocated to feed the poor and provide employment to the unemployed. Yet I continued reading the papers and hearing broadcasts. You tend to think that it is subsidy for the poor, food and employment, that strains Indian public resources, even though 2 or 3 times as much government funds are spent on subsidizing the better off. In fact, since the government spent only a miserable 1.2% in total of the GDP on healthcare, unlike in China, where the percentage is nearer 3%, the total government expenditure on health in all forms, food subsidies and employment subsidy, all these together, that is health in all forms, food subsidies, employment subsidy together, is much less than what the government spends on subsidizing the consumption of power, diesel, cooking gas, fertilizers for the relatively rich but much more vocal people of India. It is sad that the most vibrant media in the world is so silent on the needs and the predicaments of the poorest. A third of the Indians have no electric connections at all. The media made such a fuss, quite rightly in its context, about 600 million people not having power on a day in July 2 years ago when there was a terrible administrative bungle about power supply, but neglected to report the fact that 200 million of those 600 million people never had any power at all, a perpetual blackout because they were not even connected to electricity. Enough, enough, said the goddess. Go on. My 5th wish is easy to speak about, I said, since it concerns persistent deprivation I've been nagging about for decades. All children must have a decent school to go to. Every person must have medical care, beginning with preventive care. Women should not have to lead more deprived lives than men. The country should not be full of undernourished children, not to mention the most undernourished in the world. Every child has to be fully immunized, rather than a third of the children being left out. Everyone should have a home with a toilet, rather than half the population having to defecate in the open, even as India supposedly joins the elite club of the world. And there should be generally good higher education and a sustainable environment. GMT said, you asked for a lot of different things as part of one wish. However, I will not be small-minded since I'm medium-hearted. But all that you have asked for should be very easy to achieve if your countrymen start making intelligent use of the resources that economic growth generates. And this will work both ways. The advancement of human abilities resulting from these supportive changes will in turn help to sustain economic growth in the long run, because nothing ultimately is more important for economic growth than having a healthy and educated labor force. Ask the Chinese or Japanese or Korean or other Asians and they will tell you. That is surely the biggest lesson of East Asian development that India has missed. Since we agree on that, may I put in a wish, dear goddess, I said, which concerns a peculiar judicial decision in India and is very recent, because the courts have very recently recriminalized homosexual personal behavior. The British rulers had made that a criminal offense in 1861 and made many people strongly vulnerable to blackmail by the police and possibly to penalization. The Article 377 of the Penal Code was overturned by the Delhi High Court as being contrary to personal rights guaranteed by the Indian Constitution, but then the Indian Supreme Court, represented by exactly 2 judges, has reversed the reversal and made it strictly private behavior once again a social crime. Can you reverse the reversal of the reversal, dear goddess? Let me see, said the goddess. How can I persuade the Indian Supreme Court to think again? Maybe they will listen more to the voices of the Indian people than to the plea of a goddess above the clouds. Let's go on, continued GMT. Do you really want another wish? May I said. I wish we in India will recognize our strength because of the nature of the country as well as the opportunities given to us by our democracy, which has been skillfully used recently by the Aam Aadmi Party, even though they have a lot to learn about what their program should really be. We have a lot of corruption, but it has become a major electoral issue, which in a democracy is the best way for a long-run solution, which will require many administrative reforms. But there are many achievements already, and it's not the case that nothing happens here other than what the business community does, and the state in particular cannot achieve anything, as many people go on repeating. India was the country of famines until the empire ended, and we haven't had a real famine since independence, thanks to public action. India was expected a few years ago to have the largest concentration of AIDS epidemic, but public attention and social engagement has removed that threat. Since polio eradication became a politically sensitive issue, unlike the other immunizations like diphtheria and mumps, things have happened and India is now polio-free. We had a super cyclone in the fall coming from the Bay of Bengal, many times the size of Katrina in the United States, but the government moved nearly 1 million people off the coast in good time, and the predicted disaster did not happen. Even though India's record of social achievement is low, wherever they have tried hard to make a change, like in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Himachal Pradesh, education and healthcare have surged ahead, and so have economic growth, so that these erstwhile poor states are now among India's, these 3 are among India's 5 richest. We can do things if we put our mind to it. Take gender inequality, I went on. There's a lot of attention that is right now being given to the incidence of rape in India, which of course is an improvement. But some recognitions are missing. The reported rate of rapes in India is low. It is 1.8 per thousand in India, compared with 27 per thousand in the USA and 29 in the UK. There's surely a huge underestimation here, particularly when the victims come from the poorer and less privileged classes. But even after raising the Indian number tenfold, the rate of rape in India would still be lower than that in UK and USA, indeed most countries in the world. The main problem is not so much the high incidence of rape in India, but the difficulty in getting the police to cooperate and help the victims, and for the society to take greater interest in sexual assault on vulnerable women, particularly from the poorer and less privileged classes and castes. Some steps are being taken right now to change this, including stopping sexual trafficking of girls from very poor families. But much more needs to be done, and indeed can be done if we try. People are very worried, and rightly, that selective abortion of female fetuses is so common and makes the female-male ratio at birth much lower in India as a whole than in the range for European countries. But what is overlooked is that nearly in half the Indian states, in fact in all the states in India, in the south and the east, from Kerala and Tamil Nadu all the way to West Bengal and Assam, the female-male ratios at birth are well within the European range, about the range of Italy, Spain, Greece, and so on. And it is the fact that all the states in the north and the west have much lower female-male ratios, by quantum jump lower, than in Europe, that makes the Indian average come out to be so low. So there is much to learn from within India itself. Can you help in this, GMT, in making Indians less defeatist, I asked. I can't do that, said the goddess. It has to be the Indians who change their defeatist mindset. That's a letdown, I said with frustration. Not at all, remarked the goddess. I'm telling you that you can solve these problems yourself. You don't need anybody else's help. You have to know what the problems are, and that clearly, and how they can be solved. But I complain, even if it becomes clear what our problems are and how can they be solved, how can we share this knowledge and make all Indians take an interest in our real problems? Well, said GMT, the social media can help, and very importantly, you must read more books. And GMT added, the time has come for you to go to the Jaipur festival. Good reading. As the good goddess suddenly vanished beyond the clouds, I returned to my little JSAT-14, launched by the world-famous GSLV-DV, to come straight to the festival, and I'm grateful that you're all here. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Amartya Sen, one of the most brilliant, inspiring speeches of the festival opening.